They're not broke, but the clock is ticking.
Described as wildly unhappy with goals that have quietly diverged in ways that may be impossible to reconcile. But there is one thing left, one move that they could still do to turn this around.
So they've had to cut back, and Dan Wakeford has some other good numbers here too. He says the staff has been reduced from 16 full-time employees to just 5. He says they retain a chief of staff each, 1 foundation consultant.
Dan Wakeford spent 3 intense weeks speaking with insiders from Prince Harry and Meghan Markle's wider professional circle, and the reason this stands out is because of where he used to sit in their media ecosystem. As a former editor at People magazine, he wasn't just another journalist. He was one of the people actively shaping how their story was presented to the public at a large scale. During that period, he was involved in high-visibility coverage that helped frame early public narratives around Meghan's friendships and support system. That era included widely discussed magazine features where close associates of Meghan were presented as speaking in her defense during a period of intense public attention. Later, he moved to US Weekly, maintaining a similar role within celebrity media coverage circles. At that time, he was viewed as someone with strong access and close industry relationships, which positioned him as a key figure in shaping public-facing narratives. But that dynamic has now changed. Wakeford is operating independently, publishing through his own Substack titled Celebrity Intelligence. That shift is significant because it removes him from traditional editorial control and direct media gatekeeping. He no longer needs magazine approval or brand alignment. Instead, his focus is audience trust. And trust, in this context, means prioritizing accuracy over presentation. According to his reporting, based on conversations with 5 insiders over a 3-week period, the financial picture around Harry and Meghan is more complex than commonly assumed. Here's where the numbers come into focus. The Netflix partnership, often publicly estimated at around $100 million, is described in his reporting as closer to $60 million in overall value once production costs and internal allocations are considered. Their Spotify deal, previously rumored to be significantly larger, is described at roughly $5 million following its early conclusion. Speaking engagements, which once reportedly reached around $1 million per appearance, are now described as having dropped closer to $50,000 per event. Additional financial references include inherited funds linked to Princess Diana's estate, estimated around $10 million, and contributions associated with the Queen Mother's estate, estimated around $10.5 million. According to the same reporting, a significant portion of those funds has been directed toward long-term expenses, including property and legal costs.
You don't show up at some random women's retreat with a smattering of people to collect a quick check, okay? You don't sell candles using your kids' royal names and titles unless you are broke. Her clout dwindled as people lost interest in what she and Harry had going on. She was gonna move to the next generation. That was the final card she had to play, Archie and Lilibet.
Their Montecito residence, reportedly valued around $14 million, is described as carrying ongoing financial obligations, including mortgages and maintenance costs. Annual security and legal expenses are estimated in the millions, with some reports placing combined legal costs significantly higher over time. When those ongoing expenses are combined with lifestyle costs, the reporting suggests a high annual burn rate that requires consistent income to sustain. The broader takeaway from Wakeford's reporting is not immediate collapse, but sustainability pressure over time. Staffing levels are also cited as having changed significantly. A previously larger household and professional team is described as being reduced from around 16 full-time staff members to approximately 5. That kind of reduction is typically interpreted as operational restructuring, reflecting changes in cost management and resource allocation. The remaining team structure is described as streamlined, consisting of a small core group handling communications, administration, and public relations support. Overall, the picture presented is one of a high-cost public-facing operation adjusting to evolving income streams and shifting commercial deals. It reflects a transition from expansive staffing and multiple revenue sources toward a more compact structure focused on maintaining core operations and public presence. This isn't some powerhouse team expanding into new markets. It's a reduced, streamlined operation just trying to keep everything stable. This kind of setup doesn't signal growth or expansion, it signals cutbacks, adjustments, and pressure behind the scenes. And then there's another detail that stands out in the reporting.
Because he says the reported $100 million Netflix deal was closer to $60 million once development costs, overheads, and delivery tranches are accounted for. Sources say the $20 million Spotify deal netted roughly $5 million after an early exit. And he says Spare, Harry's memoir, remains their most commercially successful project. That delivered an estimated $20 million in advance.
Harry is described by sources as having limited awareness of everyday financial costs. He grew up in an environment where most things were managed for him, and according to insiders, that mindset didn't fully change later in life. Even after moving to California, those habits reportedly carried over. When you look at patterns like large-scale security expenses, a high-cost lifestyle in Montecito, and frequent focus on operational spending, it paints a picture of heavy financial reliance without hands-on budgeting involvement. This isn't just about income, it's about financial structure and decision-making style. In contrast, Meghan is described by sources as far more engaged with the financial and business side. And that difference is where tension reportedly begins to form. According to insiders, it's not just small disagreements, but a deeper mismatch in how both see long-term direction. Their goals, as described in the reporting, are no longer fully aligned. Multiple sources claim there is growing dissatisfaction and a divergence in priorities. Harry is portrayed as wanting a quieter life, away from public attention. Some insiders say he misses aspects of his earlier life, including family connections and a more private routine in the United Kingdom. In that version of his future, he would reportedly prefer a lower-profile lifestyle focused on charitable work and reduced public exposure. A simpler, less visible path. Meghan, according to those same reports, is described in a very different direction. Sources portray her as focused on high-visibility environments, media presence, and continued public relevance. One comparison made by an insider referenced the desire to stay in high-profile social and cultural spaces, attending elite events, and maintaining strong public attention.
And he says Meghan has run ticketed fan events where attendees pay $3,000. He argues, though, neither is a sustainable business model, and that's because they're outgoings.
The contrast being described is between stepping back versus staying in the spotlight. And according to the reporting, that contrast is where friction builds. A key moment mentioned in the narrative involves financial structure and future control. Some sources claim Meghan became more aware of how future financial decisions could be influenced by broader family structures and institutional relationships. That realization, according to insiders, is described as a turning point in how long-term plans were viewed. However, it is important to note that these claims are not universally agreed upon. A source close to Meghan disputes this interpretation entirely, offering a different version of events. Still, the reporting suggests that financial independence and control are recurring themes in discussions around their future direction. Another element mentioned in the reporting involves a Netflix-related production project often referred to in media coverage as a Polo-focused series. According to insiders speaking to Dan Wakeford, the project is described as facing development challenges and uncertainty around release. There are claims that the production has struggled with momentum and may not move forward as initially expected. The production model itself is also described as unusual. It relies on external creators pitching concepts, with Harry and Meghan attached as executive producers on selected projects. But one industry source quoted in the reporting suggests a shift in perception. They claim that attaching their names to projects no longer automatically strengthens deals in the way it once might have. Instead, according to that perspective, it can sometimes create additional hesitation among partners evaluating risk and audience reception. If accurate, that represents a notable change in how their involvement is perceived within certain production circles. After the attention from the Australia tour faded, the expectation was that their public profile would naturally lift future projects. But according to insiders, the reality has shifted in the opposite direction. The brand that was once seen as a door opener is now, in some cases, described as a complication during negotiations. And now there is growing discussion that Meghan may consider returning to acting. A source close to the couple confirms it is being talked about, and from a practical standpoint, it makes sense in terms of professional experience. Acting is where she has established training, recognition, and industry credibility. It is also one of the few career paths that could provide more consistent income compared to irregular project-based deals. But there is a major tension point. Returning to acting would directly conflict with the public identity she has built in recent years. It would send a clear signal that the post-royal transition did not fully evolve into a stable, long-term direction.
Wants to be Lauren Sanchez. Living her best life at couture shows. She wants to be a princess who's invited to Chanel, but she's not.
That kind of narrative shift is difficult to manage publicly. Then there are the missed opportunities highlighted in Dan Wakeford's reporting. Several projects are described as having reached advanced discussions, but ultimately falling apart. One creative role, inspired by Jenna Lyons, was reportedly seen as a stable, structured opportunity, but it collapsed during negotiations. In other cases, disagreements over compensation and creative control are cited as key sticking points. A proposed beauty-related venture is also mentioned as something that, according to insiders, made strong commercial sense but was not pursued. Across these examples, a pattern is described. Expectations were set high, but the market response did not always match those expectations. That gap between perceived value and industry valuation becomes a recurring theme in the reporting. More recently, attention has shifted to product-based launches. One example mentioned is a candle release tied to branding that references royal association in its marketing language. The timing and framing of that release have drawn commentary because it aligns closely with major public moments connected to the wider royal calendar. The use of royal-linked language in commercial descriptions has also been widely discussed in media analysis. This approach, according to some industry observers, signals a shift toward more direct monetization of available brand associations. Rather than large-scale deals, the strategy appears to lean towards smaller, more frequent product releases. The marketing style described in reports includes outreach to influencers using direct email contact methods and informal presentation formats. Some campaigns are also said to incorporate seasonal timing, including alignment with events like Mother's Day. Industry watchers interpret this as a more hands-on, fast-response commercial approach rather than large corporate partnerships.
Harry does not want the life he has right now. He misses his family, his friends, his former existence in the UK. He would, sources say, be content to downsize, move somewhere like Montana, live modestly, pursue charitable work on his own terms. He doesn't care about the appearance of wealth. He cares about the appearance of doing good work.
From a business perspective, this reflects a transition. The earlier phase focused on major agreements, including streaming platforms like Netflix, large production partnerships, and high-value speaking engagements. That phase is described as the high-value deal era. The current phase, according to commentary, is more fragmented. It includes smaller product launches, lifestyle-focused items, and event-style offerings that rely more heavily on volume and consistent output. The overall shift suggests a change in scale and structure. Instead of fewer large deals, there is a greater focus on multiple smaller revenue streams. Some analysts describe this as a more demanding model requiring constant engagement to maintain financial balance. Looking ahead, commentators sometimes refer to a next phase of their commercial trajectory.
How on earth can you have just reported everything else, Dan Wakeford, and then even question whether they have marriage issues? I mean, they do not want the same thing.
This is described as a period where lifestyle adjustments may become necessary if income patterns do not stabilize. It is framed not as an immediate collapse, but as a long-term sustainability question. One detail that has drawn renewed attention is the continued use of royal titles in official and commercial contexts. The British royal family's official website still lists Prince Harry and Meghan Markle with their titles, and those titles remain formally active. However, there are long-standing agreements, often referenced in media discussions, that are said to limit commercial use of those titles. Some commentators have raised questions about how those boundaries are interpreted in marketing materials. At the same time, there has been no formal public statement from the institution addressing these specific commercial concerns in detail. That absence of clear communication has left space for ongoing debate and interpretation in media coverage and public discussion. Meanwhile, King Charles is reportedly taking a steady approach as time continues to move forward. Attention is now shifting to the next steps, including a planned summer return to the United Kingdom, ongoing Invictus Games preparations, and coverage from sources like the Daily Telegraph, suggesting a renewed effort to engage more directly with the British market. The idea is that stronger visibility and closer ties could open up more opportunities. But the key question is whether this strategy extends their financial runway or simply exposes existing challenges more quickly. Dan Wakeford's reporting frames the overall direction as increasingly difficult rather than uncertain. According to insiders he spoke with, Harry is described as wanting a quieter life, closer to something more private and low profile, away from constant public attention. Meghan, on the other hand, is described as aiming for a more visible, high-profile lifestyle, with strong media presence and continued relevance in major public spaces. Those differences are presented as a growing divide in long-term goals. At the same time, financial and professional developments continue to stack up. A Polo-related Netflix project is described as stalled or potentially not moving forward. Speaking fees are reported to have dropped significantly compared to earlier years. Previous large-scale income sources are described as reduced or already spent, while new revenue streams rely more on smaller products and selective deals. In that context, recent product launches that reference royal association and branding have drawn attention because they suggest a continued use of the remaining public identity as a commercial asset. Some reporting also references past efforts by senior members of the royal family to set boundaries around commercial use of titles and branding. However, these boundaries are described as inconsistently enforced in practice, according to commentators. What makes the situation more discussed is how different signals appear to align across multiple areas.
Behavior, okay? You don't show up at some random women's retreat with a smattering of people to collect a quick check, okay? You don't sell candles using your kids' royal names and titles unless you are broke, okay? I've been calling her Meghan Kardashian Markle now because this is like what the Kardashians would have done 20 years ago. Remember, like 20 years ago, the Kardashians would like promote cupcakes and promote food and promote any little
when they were
product
also
just to stick
leaking
their names
sex
on it.
tapes, by the way, Lee.
Financial reporting, public polling, event turnout, and media commentary all point toward reduced momentum compared to earlier years. For example, polling such as the Roy Morgan survey showing 81% unchanged or negative sentiment is often cited alongside lower attendance at certain events and scaled-back retreat participation. Speaking fees dropping from 7 figures to much lower ranges are also viewed as a sign of reduced demand. When multiple projects stall, including entertainment deals that may not release, it adds another layer to that overall picture. Across these different examples, the interpretation and the reporting is consistent. The commercial momentum is not what it once was, and the current model is under pressure to maintain itself at the same level. The business approach described, combining media projects, lifestyle branding, retreats, and product launches, is portrayed as increasingly reliant on frequent output rather than a few major deals. Looking forward, different paths are outlined in the reporting. One option discussed is Meghan potentially returning to acting, which could provide more stable income, but would also represent a noticeable shift in public identity and branding. The broader point raised in Wakeford's reporting is that the current situation is at a transition point, where either strategy changes or expectations about scale and lifestyle may need to adjust over time. Second, Harry is described in reporting as wanting a much quieter life, potentially somewhere low profile like Montana, where the cost of living and public exposure would drop significantly. According to sources, Meghan is not aligned with that idea and sees her future in a different direction entirely. Then there's a third option mentioned by insiders, the one they suggest would be the hardest to accept. That would be stepping away from public visibility altogether. No media presence, no major branding push, and no steady stream of public-facing projects. But that also means losing most of the income sources tied to their current model. Each path, as described, forces a difficult trade-off between personal preference and what the market actually responds to. In Harry's case, sources say he has expressed interest in reconciliation and a more grounded lifestyle. But the reporting also suggests that the public-facing conflict and commentary have been part of what drives attention and commercial interest in certain projects. If he fully steps away from that narrative and reconnects more closely with Prince William and the royal institution, that storyline would change significantly. And with it, the media demand that comes from it. On Meghan's side, reporting describes a continued focus on visibility, branding, and high-profile cultural presence.
Her clout dwindled as people lost interest in what she and Harry had going on. She was going to move to the next generation. That was the final card she had to play, Archie and Lilibet. Now what is she doing? She's using their name and likeness and royal titles to sell a candle, and they're not even old enough to consent to being used in that way. You know what I'm saying?
However, the commercial results described in earlier sections, including smaller retreat attendance and lower speaking fees, are often presented as not fully matching that level of ambition. In that context, recent product launches are framed by commentators as attempts to strengthen remaining brand value, often using royal association and identity references as part of the marketing approach. Attention is now on how these strategies perform, including public response, media coverage, and whether any official response comes from King Charles III or the wider royal institution. These factors are seen as influencing how the next phase develops. The reporting also revisits a missed opportunity involving a potential role with a fashion-related company such as J.Crew, described as a more structured commercial partnership. According to commentary, that kind of role would have offered more consistent income and a clearer professional identity focused on fashion and lifestyle work without reliance on royal branding. Instead, the direction taken is described as leaning more heavily toward personal branding, visibility, and higher-risk commercial strategies. That decision is contrasted with current outcomes mentioned in earlier reporting, including smaller event attendance, reduced speaking fees, and stalled media projects. The overall financial picture described includes ongoing high expenses, such as security and legal costs, along with previously reported spending from inherited funds. These figures are used in commentary to highlight pressure on maintaining a long-term financial balance. The broader point in the reporting is that the current approach relies on maintaining attention and visibility, but the results are increasingly inconsistent compared to earlier expectations. Then comes a moment that stands out in the reporting. On the day associated with Queen Elizabeth II centenary-related coverage, product boxes were being sent out to influencers. Some listings reportedly included publicly visible basic email contacts, and the products were described using royal titles and family references in their marketing language. That timing became a focal point because in the same week, a national documentary was airing, reflecting on decades of public duty, service, and institutional history.
Well, it's interesting. I hope when Prince William gets in there, he can really shrink the size of the monarchy. Like, let's have the essential bare bones people, and that's the way to move forward. And I have such faith in Prince William and Catherine, the Princess of Wales, because they also really understand, I think, what needs to be done to modernize the monarchy and move further into the 21st century. So,
two very different narratives were circulating in the same media cycle. One focused on tradition, duty, and institutional legacy. The other focused on modern commercial branding connected to royal associated identity. For many observers, the contrast between those two messages became the most striking part of the discussion. What Dan Wakeford's reporting does, according to interpretation, is connect these public signals with broader trends that were already being discussed. The numbers, attendance levels, and project outcomes are presented as forming a consistent pattern rather than isolated events. In that reporting, retreat attendance is described as lower than expected, speaking fees are significantly reduced compared to earlier years, and several larger media projects are described as delayed or stalled. At the same time, sources quoted in the reporting describe personal differences in direction. Harry is portrayed as dissatisfied with the current trajectory and more interested in a quieter, less public life. Meghan is described as continuing to focus on visibility, branding, and public-facing projects. The institution itself is described in commentary as having not issued detailed public responses to specific commercial or branding-related claims, leaving much of the discussion to media interpretation. King Charles III is described as managing ongoing responsibilities while these narratives develop in the background.
you guys left the royal family at the beginning of 2020. Now, 6 years later, you're doing a fake wannabe knockoff royal tour. You're still using your titles to dine out. Now you're using the kids' titles. The kids have barely been in the UK. I'm not even sure if Lilibet has been in the UK but one time.
Observers note that unresolved questions from earlier years continue to influence how current developments are viewed. Attention also turns to Prince William as the next in line. According to commentary, he is closely observing financial trends, public perception, and the direction of branding and media activity connected to the wider royal ecosystem. Some observers suggest that future decisions under his leadership may be more structured and direct, especially if unresolved issues carry forward into the next stage of transition. In that context, the timeline described in reporting is becoming a point of focus. What was previously referred to as a longer runway is now viewed by some as potentially shorter, depending on how quickly institutional decisions and external pressures evolve. The combination of ongoing commercial activity, branding choices, and financial constraints is presented as creating increasing pressure over time. The overall message in the reporting is that multiple signals, financial, public, and institutional, are aligning in a way that suggests a period of transition rather than stability.